you are nominating should receive 50 free chicken sandwiches from WOCA and Chick-fil-A at the Paddock Mall. We'll review your nominations and then select one deserving organization each month. We'll announce the winner and even read the winning entry on the air. Make sure to include the contact name and phone number of the organization that you are nominating. And thanks from your friends at WOCA and Chick-fil-A in the Paddock Mall.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. Robin, there's something I regret not doing, and what it is when I was very, very young, I'm talking like 8 years old or so, I remember my grandfather telling a story of how he was in World War I, and he was, I don't know if you would consider him a fighter pilot, but I know he was in a fighter plane. I got the feeling he was, I don't know if there were two-seaters or what, I think he was in the back seat, I think. But I'm not really sure. So, and I don't know what you call that person. But I guess what I regret is not really asking enough questions about that. Now, he was in the German army, so in World War II, basically he was our enemy.
Yeah, right.
and then after, when things started getting bad over there, he decided to move his family, including my mom and my uncle, who were still very, very young children in the early, let's see, I guess it would have been the mid-1920s.
Yeah.
When they immigrated here and got out of there. And then oddly enough, my dad was, of course, an American soldier in World War II, fighting against the same army that my grandfather had been a part of. But just the idea when you hear about the fighter pilots, and you may have known somebody who was a fighter pilot, especially if somebody you were related to and could have picked his brain a little bit. But I got to cut myself a little bit of slack because, well, I was just 8 years old.
You were young.
Well, we have somebody on the phone who might be able to fill in some of those blanks for us. And my goodness, this guy has a list of credentials. Dan Hampton is on the phone, and it's certainly an honor to have him on the phone. He is a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. How about that?
Wow.
That's enough, right? Just right there. He flew thank you. He flew 151 combat missions, according to my notes. He served in the Iraq War, the Kosovo conflict, the First Gulf War. It goes on and on. He's been awarded 4 distinguished flying crosses with valor. No wonder he was so long with the last host.
Yeah.
He's received the Purple Heart, 8 air medals with valor. I won't read them all. There's too many. But I want you to know he's written a book about a lot of this. It's called Lords of the Sky. What a cool title. How Fighter Pilots Changed War Forever, from the Red Baron to the F-16. Dan Hampton. Good morning, Dan.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for the kudos. I got to point out, though, there's a lot of guys that have done a lot more than I have, especially right there in Florida.
You see how humble? I mean,
they're very humble.
My goodness,
yes.
151 combat missions. And yeah, well, thank you for doing what you do. Well, let me put it this way. You've certainly done a lot more than me.
Well, that's all relative, right? I mean, everybody does what they're good at if they're lucky. So, I'll never be a concert pianist nor a radio host. I just don't have it in me.
But you've become an author. Have you been a writer all your life?
No. I did the normal stuff through college, obviously, but I didn't really ever try to write anything for public publication, if that makes any sense, beyond military stuff until I had retired and had been out for a couple years, and that was the first book, Viper Pilot.
Do you know what I'm always fascinated with is how the precision flying, like when you see the Blue Angels, how do they fly so close without touching each other, without crashing? I mean, it's just amazing to me.
Because you would die if you did that, and that's not good. You know what? The aerobatics and the stunt stuff like that is important for PR purposes, but it's something that everybody who's got military wings has at one point flown most of that. You get trained to do it, and then fighter pilots obviously do a lot more of it. But it's without sounding cavalier, it's a matter of practice.
Let's talk about fighter pilots just for a second. Obviously, that's what the book is focusing on. My dad had a story. This is why I'm asking. In World War II, he witnessed a German jet go over. It shot nobody, and the theory was that they didn't know how to synchronize the flying with the shooting yet.
No.
No.
World War II?
Yeah.
Well, there weren't any. Well, there were jets, a few of them right at the very end, but no. And especially the Germans, they put the best pilots they had left in the jets, who had survived 4 or 5 years of warfare. They knew exactly what they were doing.
So you're saying that they just didn't shoot?
Yeah, they didn't shoot. The guns might not have worked. The weapons might not have worked. They might have been out of ammunition, or maybe they just didn't shoot for whatever reason, but they could certainly do it if they wanted to.
Okay. So, but that whole idea of flying so fast and being able to hit a target, is it changed now? Are computers in control of that, or is it still the human talent?
No. The pilot still flies it. What's gotten better are the weapon systems. So there's a wide variety of things that we can use to, use our cannons. We use cannons now instead of machine guns, and then all kinds of different missiles. So the aiming systems and the weapons have improved, but the pilot's still got to be able to put the airplane in the right place to make it all work.
Oh wow! And so what do you think is the best improvement that you've seen in all your years?
Well, on a personal level, I'd have to say it's the ejection seats. If all else, goes to hell in a handbasket, the pilot can generally still get out of the airplane. That definitely didn't used to be the case. And then, on a professional fighting level, I would again have to say it's probably the weapon systems and the way that those things can be used. I could put a 2,000-pound bomb within 6 inches, 12 inches of where I wanted it to go consistently. So, that's something that didn't happen until recently. So I'd have to say that.
Oh, wow.
You also explore the emotions of the various entities in the book also.
Yeah, that was important to me, as well as describing the history around each period. So I would pick a pilot or 2 or 3 in certain situations, write about it, but I'd explain how they got there, What were we doing in World War I, or what were we doing in Korea? How did guys from Texas or Florida end up fighting and dying, over Vietnam? What was that all about? So I would try to put all that in there because I found it interesting. I always find the why, of a situation interesting, and I thought others would too.
And how did you choose the different pilots to write about and the different scenarios?
Well, some of it I had roughly in my pointed little head when I started this, and a lot of it, I just kind of rolled with the punches. I would be reading and researching one thing, and I'd find something else, that I'd never heard of. I didn't know, for instance, that there'd been a female fighter pilot, an ace, a Russian girl named Lilia. I'd never known that. I didn't know that the guy who wrote King. Yeah, exactly. and I put all that in there. I didn't know that the guy who wrote King Kong had been a fighter pilot. Lots of things like that I would find, and I'm like, wow, that's worth talking about. And that's why the book took a year to write and got thicker and thicker as I went, because I kept finding things to put into it.
And that's what makes our country so great, is because all of the people who serve, just like yourself, sir, you're so humble. You have a mission that you set out to do to protect everyone else, and you do it, no questions asked.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said earlier, though, there's a lot of guys that have been through more and have done more than I have. And this book, although the latter part of the book is mostly about Americans because we've been the busiest since the end of the Second World War, the first part of the book covers a lot of different nationalities and pilots, so it isn't just about Americans.
We had a story on D-Day. We were talking about some fighter pilots, and we had in our community two Tuskegee Airmen, one of whom has since passed away, and there were some amazing stories from their group of defeating the odds. I'm guessing there are defeating the odds stories throughout the whole history of fighter pilots.
Oh yeah, I ran across a Canadian in the First War named Billy Barker, who ended up in a 50-1 dogfight one day.
Wow.
And that's just staggering.
Wow,
And
wow.
then there were, you were talking about your German relatives. You should look at the chapter on Hans Marseille. It's called The Star in the Rose, because I wrote about the Russian girl and this German, who I think is probably the finest fighter pilot that ever lived. Anyway,
wow.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories like that. Defeating the odds.
Dan, we have an open phone line that our listeners can use, and they are calling. Do you want to take calls?
Yeah, sure. It's up to you.
Okay. Dan Hampton, again, is our guest. His book is called Lords of the Sky, How Fighter Pilots Changed War Forever, from the Red Baron to the F-16. Good morning. Thank you for calling and for being patient with us. You're on the air now with Dan Hampton.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. I wanted to know if he had any reaction with the Tuskegee Airmen. But I wanted to know another question. What particular aircraft did he fly, and what did he consider the best fighter aircraft of World War II in Korea?
Okay, well, I would consider the...
Thank you.
I flew the F-16.
Wow.
And right at the end, I was in the F-22 program, but the F-16 is what I primarily flew. And I would probably have to say for World War II, the best fighter would be the P-51, the Mustang. In Korea, I think the F-86 has it hands down. There were other good airplanes, but something about that airplane just to me is something I always wanted to fly, and I considered it the best. So that's just my opinion.
Do we have aircraft that we don't know about, the public does not know about?
You mean out in Area 51 with the aliens?
Well, I mean, we didn't know about the stealth bomber until they finally decided to tell us about it.
Well, let me throw a question right back at you. How good would you feel about the security of the United States if everybody out there knew everything about what we had?
My answer to that is, I hope that we have secret stuff. I hope we do.
Absolutely, we do. Well, then I'll tell you, yes, it is, and everybody can sleep well at night. It's all okay.
Oh, that's wonderful to know.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Everybody's in good hands.
Why do you suppose that the United States has always seemed to be ahead of the game when it came to creating fighter jets and things of that caliber?
Well, we weren't always. Like I said, the first half of the book deals with other nationalities and air forces because, we got into World War I late and really didn't. We did a lot, but not relative to others. It was really World War II, finally, where everything took off for the United States, technically and economically and everything else. And that's what spurred the development and gave us the world that we live in today, right? Because it was the powerhouse that became America that emerged from that war. And we're still living in it. So that's part of the debt that we owed. And, I think the basic American willingness to experiment, to compromise, to think up new and better ways to do things, even when other people say you can't do it, solves a lot of those problems.
Tell me a little bit about the book writing process. When did you start this? Was it intended to be a book, or tell me about that whole process.
Yeah, Viper Pilot came out in October of 2012, and right as that was being released, HarperCollins and I were talking about this next idea, and I started writing it right after Christmas, so 2013. It took over a year to write, and writing is kind of like flying in that I think you can definitely be taught how to do it better. But it's something you can either do or you can't. And I don't have an answer as to why I seem to be able to do it. I'm glad I can. But, I'll never be able to play the piano, so there's always trade-offs.
Well, you offer a very unique perspective, sir, because some of these things we don't ever learn in school, and it's very important that we should never forget.
Well, thanks for saying that, because that was exactly the point of writing this. The larger historical things, certainly, but also the little small details that, again, I'd never been taught, or I'd been taught different versions of it that turned out not to be accurate.
I often wonder if we were told the truth about the September 11th situation. If I were the president, how would you justify shooting down a plane before it hit the towers? You know what I mean? Nobody would have believed that would have happened.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in that first book I wrote, I talked about that because I was actually up that day making sure that airliners got down where they should have gotten down, and that scenario definitely came up. And I don't know. I'm glad I wasn't the president. I was just
right. It's got to be tough. All right, we do have another phone call. Good morning. You're on there with Dan Hampton.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Hampton, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
My father was a P-38 Lightning pilot in the Second World War in the Pacific Theater, and I can remember as a young man he was always a pilot of many different aircraft, but he always talked very highly about the P-38 Lightning, the twin tail. I believe it was a light bomber besides a fighter plane. Can you have any ideas about that airplane?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. And you're right, it did close air support. They called it ground attack back then, but it's the same thing. As a fighter, it kind of depended, on who you fought as to whether it was going to be effective, and, of course, who the pilot was. I had a whole section in the book about the Lightning and the Pacific, but we ran out of space, and it got edited out. So hopefully I'll be able to put it in another one, though. Great airplane, though.
Thank you.
So does the book include stories, maybe even some funny stories about some of the pilots themselves?
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites is Hans Marseille. He was a German pilot, and he was definitely a nonconformist, hated Nazis, even though, he was fighting for Germany. He wasn't fighting for the government. And he knew Hitler hated jazz music, so at an award ceremony for himself, he purposely played Scott Joplin on the piano just to piss Hitler off, which is kind of funny.
Oh, that is a funny story.
There's all kinds of stories like that that I found that I tried to put in. So.
You write about the Red Baron. Does his reputation, is it true to form in all the stories that we hear?
Yeah, he was exactly what he's portrayed as, which is a cold, ruthless fighter pilot. But that's what he was supposed to be. He didn't take it personally. It wasn't a game or a sport like it was to others. Mm-hmm. He was just doing what he was bred to do, like a lot of them were.
Have you had the opportunity to fly planes that were before your time?
Oh yeah, and to the extent that I could, I did that to prepare for writing this book. When I could find a place that had these planes that I could arrange to fly, or even just sit in, poke around in, I would, just because it's important to get the right feel if you're going to write about it.
It must have been very hard for you emotionally when you wrote about things more current.
Yeah, we compartmentalize pretty well, and I am a man, so I try not to think too much.
Yeah.
But when I did, yeah, and especially when anniversaries of things would come up, like the start of the wars that I was a part of, or the other day, while I was in New York, somebody pointed out that it was the 18th anniversary of Khobar Towers.
Oh.
I was there too. I'm always in the wrong place at the wrong time, and yeah, you can definitely get a little emotional about it if you let yourself do it. I try to look at it a little more clinically now if I can.
The book is called Lords of the Sky. We do not have a copy. If we did, I would give it away to our listeners. How do we buy it? I know I went to your Facebook page. I liked your page, by the way. I did that thing you do. And I noticed on there you can read an excerpt from the book right there. Do you have a website for the book, or how do we do this?
Yeah, there's a website. It's danhampton.org, and then there's the Facebook page, which is better than the website because HarperCollins puts all the media clips and other things, not all of them, but some of them in there. And I respond to everybody who gets a hold of me. It may take a while, but I will. You can buy the book through all the normal places, bookstores, I think Costco, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, airports. I was walking through the airport the other day coming home, and there it was staring me in the face. Big, nice, bright blue cover. Can't miss it.
And do you help guide the soldiers coming home too?
Guide them?
Yes. If they have any problems or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, anybody. And I've had a couple guys that have wanted to talk because everybody handles that in a different way, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, And even after I retired, I went back over as part of the government, I guess you'd say, and I was on the ground in Iraq and other places doing stuff. So I know that side of it.
Wow.
Well.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody that has any issues.
Dan, thank you for being on the air, and the bigger thank you for what you've done to serve us all. And good luck with the book, and come back.
Well, I appreciate you all having me. Thanks for the pitch, and I'll come back anytime you like. Just get a hold of New York, and they'll arrange it.
All right. Dan Hampton, we'll take a little break, and we will be right back. This is The Source, WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. More violence in Iraq. This time, reports of militants killing Iraqi soldiers they were holding captive.
The organization Human Rights Watch says up to 190 men were killed in the northern city of Tikrit after studying the photos and satellite imagery. Some of the photo captions warned this is the fate that awaits